So welcome everyone. I'm Reverend Kathy Mastriani, Executive Director of the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation. And today is July 27th, 2023, and it is my deep honor to interview a beautiful soul, a beautiful wise sage of our Science of Mind history today to learn about his story and his journey in Science of Mind. And so we are interviewing today Reverend Dr. Arthur Chang. So welcome, Dr. Chang. How are you doing today?
I am doing so fine, especially after that wonderful meditation,
Ah,
because there are many aspects of life that I enjoy, which is one is the Taoist aspect of life, even though I'm science of mind, because science of mind has a way of spreading its tentacles into all the religions. But I love the idea of flow, and you set the tone with that flow, and I feel that flow right now.
oh,
I'm from Jamaica. I am from Bob Marley's country. I'm from the country of the the Marcus Garvey who came here and changed some of the black culture problems that were happening here. That's the Jamaica. It's the Jamaica that has all these great runners running, but I wasn't one of them. Well, I was in some way. Um, and I come from a father who was a migrant Chinese and a mother who is a black Jamaican. And I had a wonderful childhood. My father was really about principle. He all his principles were fundamental. If you work, you must eat, and if you eat, you must work. You must also always be honest. And these are the kind of principal things that he did. And my mother was about love. You know, I was a Boy Scout, and she would make sure that I had my clothes and my scarf and all the things that were there. It's one of the things I really did well, being a Boy Scout. I became what we call a Queen Scout even before I was 15. Usually, you get to 15 and you take the Senior Scout badges, and then you become a Queen Scout. And Queen Scout because we were part of the British rule. And when the Queen is in power, and of course she has been in power for more years than we can count, it's Queen. But when the King is in power, it would be a King Scout. It would be equivalent to American Eagle Scout. So that was something I really enjoyed. I also enjoyed the fact that growing up Catholic, I was intensely involved, but also intensely questioning all the time. And I was a choir boy. I didn't become an altar boy. I sang the mass in Latin and all that. So singing has been always a part of my life. And when I was a teenager, my my music teacher in high school got me on to one of the really outstanding pianist teacher, and I did singing lessons with him. So singing has always been part of who I am, who I was, and sometimes my wife tries to turn it off, and unfortunately she hasn't succeeded. But I grew up intensely Catholic, but always questioning. And then I joined the Rosicrucian as I became a teenager to find out more about the mystical side of life. I started to read about Eastern mysticism and also learn some of the mysteries that they teach about. And then one day, a friend of mine told me about this group that's called Science of Mind, and it was being taught by a wonderful Jamaican called Hector Sage. He was a pharmacist by trade or profession, and a note-free speaker. And every Tuesday night, there was in this little hall from 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock, this man who got up and spoke about science of mind and earth stones and all that. And at first, my hand was always going up with questions after, which were allowed. And I always had questions, and I just kept asking questions until finally I noticed my hands weren't going up that often anymore. And one day he asked, who would like to purchase a Science of Mind textbook? And he was sending to buy them from somewhere here in America. He was really belonging to the other side of religious science at the time. And and so I bought my Science of Mind textbook, which which I still have here. And it's it's all messed up with with colors and all that because I used it. And then I was moving into drafting, I had gone to a technical college and learned that. And then I met my wife in high school, and now we're married for some 50 odd years. And so we didn't get married right away. I mean, she migrated, my family migrated to America. And finally, because of my drafting architectural skill, I was able to migrate too. So we came here, and we were going to Canada at first, and somehow or other, we switched to California because the Rosicrucians were more in California than in Canada. And Science of Mine was here. And so the first time I came here, I found out from one of my Jamaican friends who was here that this Science of Mine thing that you've always been talking about, he says, it's next door to the Unemployment Bureau, which I am supposed to report to so that I don't get on the dole when I come here as a migrant. And so as soon as I reported there, I came across to what is now Home Center. It wasn't Home Center then because it was the older classical building that was there. Founders was there. It was there. This is 1969. 69, 79. I get my days mixed up. Could be 79. And the end of 79, I came here. 69 because founders opened at 60. Yeah, so it must have been 69. And so I went across and I wanted to join in the classes. And I heard that it was a year class and it started in September. I couldn't join, but you could take the correspondence course. Kathy, we had about $500 with us when we came here. And the course was $150. And I took out my checkbook and wrote $150 for the course because I couldn't get into the course. So I took my course by correspondence. And by the end of the year, I had passed my course and was able to get into the second year. And the second year, the teachers started to notice me and think that there was something special about me. And but by the time I was through with that, and I decided, I didn't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go to school and study psychology, which I did. I came to Founders when they offered. I was still in architecture. I came to Founders when they offered a 1 week course, 2 weeks course in studying to be a practitioner. 2 solid weeks. You come full time. The only time it ever happened. And I paid my money and I went there working and all that. And so in 2 weeks, I was a practitioner. And Dr. Hornaday said, some of you, there are too many practitioners here. Some of you ought to go to some of the other churches around. I ended up at Guidance with Dr. Morgan. And I stayed here. And before you know it, I was the head of education there. Michael Bickford came in my class. Nirvana Gale came through my class. Not that I'm responsible for them. They were already brilliant when they came there. And everybody wanted to give me a scholarship to go to the School of Ministry. I refused it. I went and studied psychology and got a degree in psychology. In the meantime, I took my architectural exam and became a licensed architect in California. And all these things are happening. And I'm resisting being in ministry. Everybody is telling me I should go in ministry. And I didn't go. So when Kodik Nakata came and became head of the school, they wanted a group of people, thinkers in the group, to redo the practitioner training because Guidance had excellent practitioners, well trained by Dr. Dan's school, and I was part of that. And they wanted to know why there was such disparity in the training of practitioners throughout the movement. And so Kodik Nakata got the head of the Science of Mind magazine, John Niedendorf. I'm surprised I'm remembering the names. And there was Dr. I've forgotten her name now. She wrote a book on studies, but anyway, she was there. She's a PhD, and a couple more ministers, and we had debates about ideas and stuff. And she made a formulation of what a practitioner course ought to be like, and that's when we had our formal practitioner course that was the same course throughout the entire movement, so we could bring everybody up to that point. So over the years, I went being the head of the education department of guidance when Dr. Dan was expanding. He actually invited me to leave architecture and come and be the head of his department of education there, and I did. And unfortunately, things didn't always go according to plan, as I talk about many times. And so he had to shut down. In the meantime, what happened is that he had offered me a scholarship to go to School of Ministry, and the warning that he had was such that I didn't know, because my wife didn't really want to be married to a minister, and I resisted the Catholic when they tried to encourage me to go into the priesthood, and I thought I had escaped that thing. But I was always interested in mysticism, and I always studying it and studying from all the religions. And then in the meantime, I bump upon people like Joseph Campbell and other really important mystical thinkers. And my expansion started to move into all kinds of direction, but always science of mind was there. But before I became a practitioner, I need to go back for a moment. When I admitted to the powers that be about becoming a practitioner, they told me I would have to cancel my relationship with that group, the Rosicrucians, and I did, and I haven't been back. And I thought it was so unfair because Dr. Dr. Hornaday belonged to all kinds of things that they talked about. I didn't know why it was important to them for me not to be part of the Rosicrucian. And not that I felt like I have an obligation not to be, but I never did go back. I stayed with science of mind, but I also stayed with a wide study. And in this wide study, it got me up to where I realized I was teaching Ernest Holmes's process at Science of Mind, and that got me in trouble. Now, let me tell you what happened is that I'm married. I have two kids, a son and a daughter, Carolyn and Gregory, and so I finally went to the School of Ministry. I got a year off, and so I had to study for 2 years to do the ministry because of my background and all the things I had studied, and there was a richness in my background, and everybody recognized it. So that was easy for them to give me a year off from that. And then, the thing that happened with me is that I got called I became a minister, and I went back to Dr. Dan's church, and I realized I didn't really want to be an assistant minister anywhere right now, because I felt with the background I had with Campbell and all of these other world religion background, it was so enriched that I felt I really need to be doing my own thing. So I got called by Janie Hatch Roberts at Westside, and she wanted me to be an assistant minister there. I didn't really want to do it, but I went anyway to help her out. And how that started is that one summer she wanted a vacation, and they were at Westside College at the time, LA College at Westside. And I went over there and taught, and people were so excited about me that I was to teach for 2 weeks, and she asked me to teach for another or 1 or 2 more weeks. And then she wanted me to be her assistant minister because everybody was so excited. I didn't want to do it, but I started doing it, and she got sick. She had cancer, and so sick that she couldn't continue. Now I am at UCLA as a licensed architect working with one of the departments there, and I had to find time now to be the full-time minister there. But before I actually was appointed, I had to candidate because there were some students from the School of Ministry who were assisting her, and they wanted the job. So I candidated, I got the job. O.C. Smith came over, and we we had a good time there. And so now they're thinking about expansion for me, and so people thinking that you need to have a big audience and this and that. And then the founder situation came up. Dr. Hornaday died. And I never really applied to anywhere, even though in that case, I did candidate, but it wasn't a formal candidacy. And they literally knew that they were going to select me from the start, but they had to go through the procedure. Anyway, Dr. Dan, it was actually past the time when you could apply for founders. Dr. Dan then went and asked them if they would accept me. And of course, Dr. Dan had tremendous influence in the movement, and they did. So I became the last speaker one February, and I can't even remember what year that was. And George Bendel had come, and George Bendel died there. And Dorothy Love took over from George Bendel as the interim minister. And I got my first exposure to the national scene as a minister because it was happening in Long Beach. And how that came about is that they had asked me to be a part of a panel when the Rodney King issue broke out, and it was about racism. And I refused it several times. But what had happened is that at Guidance, I had developed a whole program about Black mystics and sages that traced the history of Black contribution from the time of the Greeks, Egypt, and coming all the way down into Malcolm X and some of the great King and all that. And they knew of it. And Guidance people ask what's her name now? I've forgotten her name, but she's one of our ministers who had a master's in sociology. And she was putting the team together, and she called me several times, and she said, "What do you want?" "Oh, I want you to sit on the panel." I said, "Why would people ask me the question when they don't even know who I am?" And she called back several times, and I said no several times. And finally, she said, "What will it take to get you there?" I said, "I want 20 minutes." She said, "I can't give you 10 minutes, but I can give you 15 because I have to give another minister who's like you 15 minutes. And in that 15 minutes, I condensed the entire course, of Black history. And it was so intense that it was the first standing ovation anybody got in the entire conference. The people just burst out in a standing ovation when I was done. Surprised me. I was so intense because I was more focused on the material than I was focused on myself. And people felt the intensity and the facts of what were being said and the way it came together. And God was working God's miracle as God can. And after the conference, I was invited to go to the Asilomar, and they had one open spot on a Thursday for 20 minutes. When I was through, and the guy told me that I was through, I was stopping right then, but I wasn't finished. And the crowd got up and said, let him finish, and they were clapping and all that. So I had to come and finish. And then the next year, I was asked to open both conferences, both weeks. I flew down the first week. They flew me down, and I was going to stay fully the second week, so I was going to drive down the second week. And my luggage got stuck in this little plane and couldn't come out. My clothes were in there. My talk was in there. Everything was in there. So Beckwith was also there. And I had jeans on when I went there. And Beckwith was asking me, what do you want? I can lend you this. He lent me a shirt. He said, you want to underpants? I said, no, I'm fine with that. I wore my jeans. And I had to get up there, and without notes and without even referencing what it is, I had a standing ovation after that. And the following week, same thing, but I had my notes. Then the other group, the international group, with Richelieu invited me, flew me down to their conference a week, the year after. And I spoke in two different settings, one in the chapel and one in the big Merrill Hall. And the people just went crazy there. And at that time, there was some craziness about this Chang person. You know, I went down and did the opening, the keynote speech, and she had come from the church up north and took over for Peggy Bassett, and she was being installed, and she invited me to be her keynote speaker. So all kinds of good things were happening.
Lots
Now,
of good
understand,
things.
when I went to Founders, I wasn't even ordained.
Wow.
When I went to Founders, I am following the great Dr. Hornaday. So there is absolutely no chance for a minority person to inherit that position from Hornaday. It never should have happened. Then the other thing is, one of the experienced ministers who I knew pretty well said to me, Arthur, you know the reason I didn't apply for that job, because I knew that whoever applied for that job is going to be fired, because nobody can sit in the place of Hornaday. He's going to be fired. And his words were true. In 3 years. In 3 years, there were people who did not appreciate the broad approach I had, even though I was teaching science of mind. But I tried to tell them, I'm not only teaching Ernest Holmes' product, I'm teaching his process. But some didn't, they're too set in on hearing how Hornaday said, and Ernest said, and Ernest said. And I wasn't always doing that, but I was doing what Ernest did. And I did, and also did talk about what Ernest said, but it wasn't enough for them. And so one holiday like this, one vacation day like this, after 3 years, I got a call that they have pulled me off the radio, because by now I am doing 2 services on Sunday, 1 on Wednesday, and 5 talks on radio every week. And then I teach class whenever I could. You know, this, and then sometimes I get invitation to speak or to go somewhere or funeral, and this is my reality. And anyway, they pulled me off radio because there were some people who were so fundamentalist about what I think science of mind was, that I was off radio, and before you know it, I was fired. I was fired. No, they didn't have the authority to fire me. And without getting into a lot of that, because I really want to talk to you about process, and I don't know how much time you have. It resolved itself. There was court and this and that. The people overwhelmingly voted for me to be their minister. And so I was restored. And so here I am. But what my real purpose is now is 2. One purpose is to make sure that Founders is still intact when I leave here, so that those who inherit it understand that this is our Actus Mundi, not for just our members, but for religious science, for centers for spiritual living, however we want to call it, for science of mind. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, Ernest Holmes' process means that we continue to grow. And growing really means moving into where we are now with process theology, process philosophy, which is exactly what Ernest says in the first part of the textbook, when science and religion come together. The way they're doing it, and the way we're not moving into it, at least as far as I know, I'm the only one who consider myself a process science of mind minister. It's really sad in my mind, because it means we're turning Ernest Holmes' teachings into dogma. And John Dewey, the great American philosopher, said that, you know, truth is never something that is settled. We're always discovering truth, and that we're always changing. Now we approach things the way Aristotle approached things, about this absoluteness, and, you know, where God is omnipotent and God is omniscient and God is whatever the other one is, omnipresent. And what we're teaching here is that in some aspect, God doesn't change. God is immutable. That's true. But in some aspect, God does change. When I pray to God, I know that God knows who I am. how can God, who is absolute and unknowing about anything that is different from perfection, know who you are and who I am? Because God has a changing aspect and God has a permanent aspect, a primary aspect. And these are things that we need to have an idea about. And so what I'm saying to you is that there's no sense of the presence of God if it's just a one-sided thing. It's got to be a relationship between us. I know we use the word unity, and we use unity to cover all sins. So we're unity, we're God, he's God, I'm God, everybody's God. And it becomes a kind of senseless mishmash of not even understanding what it is to have a relationship with each other and with God. And the way it is right now is that if we understand that God has this temporal aspect, which is changing, and in that sense, God is growing, God is becoming, and it's not being that is important, it is becoming that is important. It is events that is important. It's the verb of us that is important, not the nouns of us. And if people begin to understand that in science of mind, then we are doing what Ernest Holmes would have done if he was here. We would continue to grow by incorporating the best knowledge that is coming out of quantum physics, out of philosophy, and out of good theology. Now, Ernest Holmes is at fault for knocking theology, even though he was a great theologian himself. How can you knock something? What Ernest really wanted to do is knock bad theology, not all theology. And he, when he says theology is this, that's because Ernest never went to college. And it doesn't mean he's not brilliant, and it doesn't mean he's not genius, but there are certain things that people who go to college, and sometimes people who don't go to college, get. But Ernest was so brilliant and so sure of himself, and had to be for the kind of philosophy he taught, that he didn't understand that when Aristotle says to be perfect means nothing can be added and nothing can be taken away. That means God cannot have any experience of us. God cannot know what's going on. He says, well, God doesn't know sin because it means God would be a sinner. I disagree with that. How would Jesus say God, heaven and rejoice when one sinner repents? We have mixed some of the brilliance of Greek philosophy with biblical knowledge in such a way that sometimes it doesn't make sense. And what makes sense, Kathy, I don't know how much time do I have left?
You're doing fine. I have some other questions
Okay,
too, but I
all right.
want you to
Well,
share.
well,
This is
well,
beautiful. Thank you.
Heraclitus was a pre-Socratic philosopher that says everything flows. He says you can't step in the same river twice. But Parmenides came around the same 500 BC after him, and he said things come from an invisible substance. Plato picked up the invisible substance, didn't pick up things flow, and you can't step in the same river twice. And so did Aristotle. And this became classical theism, as we can call it right now. The neoclassical theism now incorporates the work of Heraclitus, who talks about life is change. And that's what life is. Life is process, not substance. And quantum physics is bearing that out. And they say that reality comes into being and perishes immediately. We can't pick that up with our senses. And that's why we don't see it. But that is what is the reality that we're in. And it doesn't mean what it means is that change is reality. And it means that it means that principle still is there. And the next thing is God, I'm forgetting the next thing. There's one other thing that my mind isn't as sharp as it used to be. But anyway, there's one other aspect to it where you can think of things that don't exist, and that's part of it too. We can think of anything that we think is true or not true, and that is part of it. And I'm missing the word right now. But what I'm saying is that these are the three aspects of the reality that we are in right now. And the way science of mind can grow and evolve is by beginning to understand the dimension that God is not omnipotent in the sense of coercion. You and I choose our purpose. God does not choose. I know we have this thing that Michael gives us, and it's brilliant. You know, what is God's this and what is God's that? What God does from the point of view of process is God put options before us. God is forever putting options before us, but we have to choose. That's what freedom is. Freedom means the future is open. So the past is responsible for the present. So we don't throw away the past. We, oh, the past is history, throw it away. That's nonsense. When you have Alzheimer's, you're in the present, but you have no idea what your life is about. Without your past is 99.999 of the reality that you recognize. That's what your past is. So we need a past, but we don't need a past to totally influence the present in a way where you can't change the future. So God's effect comes not by coercion, but by persuasion. God puts before you I put before you this day, good and bad, right and wrong, life and death, choose life that you and your descendants may live. This is what Abraham is putting before the people. It's true. That's process. And when Ernest Holmes says you are responsible for your future, you know, for your well-being, he's saying the same thing I'm saying, that God does not give you a purpose, but God does give us an aim. And the aim is goodness. So goodness is to give that spear point, that arrow point to what you choose to do. It's not just choosing. And when I say you have freedom, it doesn't mean you're just free to do whatever you want to do, because there's still laws that are operating, just as we say in Science of Mind, that as you give, so do you receive, you know, that kind of thing. There's still laws, but within the laws, there is a lot of flexibility, not just for humans, but for particles. In other words, there are two aspects to everything that exists in the universe. One aspect is mind, and the other aspect is the body, the physical body. And everything has some aspect of it coming all the way down. That's why evolution is possible. If it weren't there to begin with, then the scientific notion of evolution wouldn't make any sense. It's because God's intelligence was there in the beginning, and evolution is something talked about by Ernest Holmes all the time. Ernest Holmes believed in process, except when he says there's no process in treatment, there's a process of treatment, there's no process in treatment, because Ernest is seeing thought as the totality of what's happening. But if you read Ernest Holmes in Good for You, he says you should swing from prayer to performance. He says you must take action. And it's not just in your mind. It's, okay, where do I start? What do I do? This is the psychology and physiology of Science of Mind, which doesn't get emphasized enough. And so I'm saying that if we are open to recognize that we're not threatened by process theology, it's the evolution, the natural evolution of Science of Mind. But besides me and Rod Carter, as far as I know, nobody else talks about this. And it seems like we are in the point where we could end up with dogma, which is the last thing Ernest Holmes wants. We're not honoring Ernest Holmes by merely agreeing with everything he says. We're honoring Ernest Holmes by building on what he has said. If it's the latest, as he says, it's science, it's religion, and it's philosophy. Well, these things have moved on, and we are holding on to this idea of stability when life is event. As long as you hold on to stability, you're never going to go forward. And I'm not saying people can understand what I'm teaching, because I think many people really don't. But then I don't think I've tried to break it down enough to where they can understand. And what I want to do is I want to write a book called The Future is Open. And I want to introduce some of these notions, not in a deeply philosophical way, because it's almost ununderstandable for most of us when you get into the philosophy of Whitehead and Hartshorn. Especially Whitehead. You're just, what the heck is he talking about? But for the philosophers who understand it and have broken it down into theology, it is more available to us. And science of mind, New Thought did it through, what's his name, Alan Anderson and Deb Whitehouse.
Nice.
They wrote process, not science of mind, but New Thought.
Mm-hmm.
But they never broke it down. What they put online has to do with things that were said by the great Whitehead, and it's really hard. It was easy for him because he's an actual philosopher. He has a PhD in philosophy,
Wow.
and Whitehouse has a PhD in psychology. So it was easy for them. But even when we used to speak at New Thought, conferences, and by the way, New Thought gave me their highest award,
The torchbearer? The
yes,
torchbearer?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. They presented me that some years ago because I usually go there and speak almost any year they call me on. I would go down there and speak. Sure.
Again, I'm grateful. I love your passion about this because this really is not just about the process theology, but it's about who you are. This is what you're passionate about, and to integrate science of mind with process science of mind. I think that is your legacy. It sounds like an important legacy that you're leaving for the movement.
Thank you. I think the fact is we have to stay on the cutting edge. We can't, and part of it comes back to John Dewey, not to come to a point where you absolutely assume that whatever you think is true. In a sense, truth is more tentative than that, because truth, we are finite beings with minds that can only grasp so much, and life is constantly changing. The moment you think you know something else has already evolved into something else, and we have to be able to stay up on it. And if we don't, then we're going to dogma, and then nobody can talk to us, because you're disrespecting what Ernest Holmes did. I'm not disrespecting what Ernest Holmes did. I am appreciating. I'm using the soil that he planted, which wasn't his words, but his approach. It is Ernest Holmes' approach of studying everything and taking the best. He was the great synthesizer, but he was great in terms of what was available to him at the time. And I even see in his big book, Living the Science of Mind, there's one essay when he recognized that the law of cause and effect has been surpassed. There's an essay in there where he said that because he knew a little bit about quantum, but it wasn't that prevalent during his time. It wasn't that available to everybody, but it's far more available now. And what we have to be afraid of doing, what we have to be concerned about doing, is taking what we agree with and saying, yeah, this is science of mind, and then ignoring what we don't agree with, when we should be able to sit with everything.
Nice.
And see how it makes sense, because that's the only way that we are giving our philosophy a future. It's like a child. If a child doesn't grow, what kind of future does a child have? And we are the children of science of mind. And it is up to us not to just say, okay, Ernest says, keep my teachings pure. Ernest was wrong in saying that. He was wrong in saying that on one account. He was right in the account that don't bring all these other things in there, like burning this and burning that and doing this and rituals of this and rituals of that. I think that is what he was perhaps referring to. But he's not right in the sense that it is about his teachings. What he's should be right about is keep my process pure. And the process is how I went to look at everything that's available and select what seemed to be authentically good and make sense in terms of what we know. Because in our lifetime, we have to incorporate what we know. We can't incorporate what is to be known. We can only incorporate what we know. And Ernest did that. So this is not a criticism of Ernest. His brilliance is shining and will always shine. But it will shine better if we build on what he has done and not simply take it for granted that he said everything. I had somebody at Founders, when I went there, the person was operating the booth. He said, why you have to go and talk about all these things? Ernest Holmes has already solved them. And so this implicit criticism of being wider, broader, and more enriched is not acceptable to some people. And I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying that, you know, we feel like I got it. Well, what we should get is the process of evolving and becoming and knowing that every single moment is a new moment of becoming for you, for me, and for everyone and for the universe. And we are part of that. And, you know, when we understand we are the universe becoming aware of itself and we are in a participatory universe. Philosopher John, whatever his name is, said that. I'm sorry, I'm losing name at this time in my life. So, you know, these are things that I've grown up with. I've grown up with the Campbells. I've grown up with some of the mystics around there, the Alan Watts and so on and so forth. And they are, for me, part of what William James is somebody we don't pay enough attention to. He's a process philosopher, not just the father of American psychology. He's recognized as one of the great philosophers in the world, not along with Plato and Aristotle and all that. William James, our American guy, is right up there with them when people understand. And we take him as part of our tradition in New Thought. And if you look at the wall and Founders, you'll see his name up there for that historical thing. And we need to bring these people into our teaching somehow and let people realize, yes, you want to know how to move and how to treat and all that and change your life. But some of us want to know a little bit more of the substantial aspect of what our philosophy is based on and how we can make it work. And it's not just about thinking. It's also about doing. And we need that thinking, but it's not magic.
What do you see the future of science of mind and New Thought?
I see the future as being bright if we decide that we don't know everything and we can know some new things and we can keep searching for the truth, which is not a fact. It's a process of understanding our relationship with ourselves and the universe and be willing to make adjustments in our thinking and our philosophy when it's obviously something that we have moved along and know more of than we did just formerly. We are backing up all the way back to the Greek philosophers, which is really great, but it's not complete anymore. And so we need to understand when the change comes about, how to make the change. Founders started out being the mother church. And I have never heard of any mother that was kicked out of its position or her position once once something has made change. Your mother is your mother. And so what does mother church mean? It means that it has a symbolic reason for being. It is our axis mundi. It is where Ernest Holmes and William D. Hornaday came together with somebody who is not in that picture, but whose presence is the back of that picture in Paul Williams, a Black architect who was a genius and not fully recognized at his time, any more than the genius of Ernest Holmes was fully recognized in his time, even though it was getting more and more popular. Ernest Holmes was a genius. Hornaday was a different kind of genius. Hornaday was like the popularizer of science of mind, of Ernest Holmes's work. He was like the Saint Paul compared to Jesus. He was like the Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu. He was like the Chuang Tzu compared to Lao Tzu. That's what Hornaday was like. But what does this mean? When founders were in effect, it was supporting the entire movement. The monies that came from founders didn't go to founders. It went to our headquarters, and it paid for headquarters, and it paid for the development of ministers all over the country. And so that is what the Mother Church does. And the great thinker and the one who came into represent the great thinker, which is Ernest Holmes, was Hornaday, and he did that. Now, as usual, relationships don't always last forever. Things can go wrong in relationships. Things don't always go according to plan. And finally, Hornaday felt the necessity, because of the fact that he disagreed with some of the attitudes and decisions of the headquarters, to take the church into a field church. The field church doesn't make founders less relevant to what it symbolizes. And this is the thing that people need to understand. A symbol, this iconic place, is more than just a name, Founders Church. It is really the embodiment of our movement that is recognized, that is exhibited architecturally. And what a wonderful piece it is, because it's a national monument now. So it's not like it's some little old building somewhere in a corner that said, well, we have to go do something about it. Now, at the same time, I'm going to tell you, it's pretty hard to keep it going, because things have changed. We no longer live in a place where mostly English speakers come. We live in a place that has mostly Spanish speakers and Korean speakers and different things. So we have to find new ways to go on. But the idea is, this church symbolizes all of us in the movement. And we should see it as our sacred spot, our immovable spot, our axis mundi. And when we stop seeing it like that, it's like doing what some people say, the past is history. The past is not history. The past is relevant to people who understand its significance, and we should understand the significance of founders as the life that came forth,
Yes.
as a bloom that came forth, that represent the best in us, and it still does.
I love that. And as you know, when I was just still in ministerial school, and I was able to visit founders, and it touched my heart so much. Just walking, I could feel it. There's something about history it's a feeling. It's not just words in a book and you close the book. It's just something so meaningful, that I was guided to have my ministerial
Well,
ordination ceremony
we were
there.
so proud of you. We
And
were
that
so
was
proud
just,
of you.
thank you. It was such a sacred honor. So I'm just, again, very grateful for you and your entire team, Pat Gentry and Ann,
Yeah.
and, for, like you said, through the different changes, just really, you've really held that vision, that great vision of Ernest Holmes, like a beacon in that beautiful church. And we're really grateful. We're so grateful for you.
Well, Ernest Holmes means a lot to us. But to honor Ernest Holmes best is to grow what he started, not to simply turn it into an element of worship. We need to take the good that he has started and let it grow into wherever it grows. We shouldn't decide that it must grow this way or that way. That is when we have a fixed idea about what truth is. But as John Dewey say, we must understand that truth is something that is evolving all the time in human being. And we must have that openness to go where it takes us. And so science of mind, yes, it's not, yes, religion always need to be telling people this is what certainty is. And we love certainty. But for the true truth seekers, it's not about certainty in life. It's about becoming. It is about what we can become and how we can become with what we know. And yes, principles don't change. There are still principles that are being honored. Ernest Holmes is right about principles. Whether he's right about everything that he said about principle is another thing. And that's for us to discover and to put forward. And, when I'm sick, I go to the doctor. I do my prayer, but I still go to the doctor. Because for me, these are prayers that I've already formulated in knowledge. And there's no reason for me to just sit mentally. When I'm hungry, I don't just sit and think about food, I eat. When I want to be in a fitter way, I exercise. We tend to we really should honor the brilliance of mind and thought, but it's not complete without the brilliance of the body and what we know and how we can use it. And it's the dance, it's the yin yang. Life is a yin yang. That has always been my favorite of all symbols, the yin yang, that it is in constant motion all the time. And it's the balance that we're trying to strike between thought and thing, between yes and no, between good and bad, within the context of how life operates, between right and wrong. It's that balance that we strive toward. And the only way we can strive toward it and get along with people is for us to not just be too absolute about what we think we know. And that's why some people murder people, because, if you don't belong to my religion, then yeah, you should be killed. If you did this to my religion, you should be killed. And these are really childish ways of seeing this life, because it hangs on all of us getting on together as well as we can. And science of mind can play a role in that. You write about peace all the time, and certainly peace is a good thing to write about. But we also have to recognize that the world is also the way the world is. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't strive toward peace, but there's never going to be absolute health for everybody all the time, and never going to be absolute peace for everybody all the time, because life has this interactive aspect of it. And some of it is disagreeable, but it's what it is. And Adam didn't make it so, and Eve didn't make it so. It's so because it is so. And within that context, science of mind has to be able to teach people how we can still move along and make this world work, despite the fact that we are never absolutely agreeing on anything.
Is there anything else, though, that's on your heart, or is there anything else you'd like to share with?
Well, what I'd like to share is the fact that I don't want people to think that ministry has always been easy and comfortable. I didn't get to 30 years actually the end of May, because I started in June when I started some 30 years ago. It has been rough sometimes. And it has challenged my faith and love and all these things to have to stand up at times with people who in their own rights disagree and wanted to do something different, and also for the people who disagree with the disagreeable people and wanted me not to leave and not to stay, not to just do what they want. And it is in that faith, not praying for somebody to be wrong and somebody to be right, but in that faith of praying for the wholeness and the healing of what the situation is. And sometimes you have to take an operation. Something has to be cut to surgically to make things work. And so for ministers coming back of me, there's that. But there are also the people that love and dedicate themselves to your ministry and to your teachings and to their own openness to themselves, because that's what I encourage, for people to think and for them to find out what their experience of truth is, or it is to them. Because not everything I tell people, I want them to think that, yes, go out and apply that. I said, put it on the shelf and give it some thought and see how it goes. But I can't tell you how grateful I am to all the people who have passed through these 30 years who have helped me to be here with you in this moment. I am profoundly grateful. As Eckhart says, if the only prayer you ever pray is thank you, it will be enough. And you know it, and I know it, and he's right. And every night before I go to bed, I hold Cecile's hand, and we pray for each other with a thank you prayer and an affirmation of the good. And then I pray for her side of the family and my side of the family. Then I pray for Pat and Ann and Founders staff. And then I pray for the members that I know need special help. And then I pray for the entire membership. Then I pray for our state, and I pray for our world, and especially where there's war. And I do all that prayer before I go to sleep. Then I pray for the fact that all of us can have a restful night, and that we can get up next morning feeling well and be able to, to go to our task with enthusiasm and strength. And that's a prayer that we have been doing now for probably about a year, and I find it really meaningful. And so it's a prayer of gratitude. And so to Founders and all the people who have contributed to my being here and my ability to accomplish whatever I have accomplished. Thank you. And to you, thank you very much. I'm really so grateful to you, Kathy.
Well, thank you, Dr. Chang. We're so grateful for you and your light that you've shined, and for being a part of the Archives Wise Sages, knowing that this video will be listened to and relished and really taken into people's hearts, and really let them really explore, who they are, who they're meant to be, and how they can use science of mind in their lives. And again, you've given them so much more to learn about and to grow. And so I'm just thank you so much for your time and for all you do for our movement.
Well, anytime. Just know anytime. Okay.
Sounds good.
Love you, and appreciate the work you do. And God bless you.
God bless you.